My name is Major Victoria Ames. I am 41 years old. I have been a military legal officer for 15 years. And on a Thursday morning in April, I received a letter from a man I had prosecuted 7 years ago. His name was Aaron Tully. He had been a private in the Royal Signals. He had been charged with falsifying military expense claims, a series of inflated supply requisitions over a 6-week period that had directed regimental funds to an account connected to him, a financial crime, serious enough to carry a custodial sentence. I had been the prosecuting officer. I had built the case. I had presented it before a court-martial board. I had believed the case was sound. The board had convicted him. He had served 7 years. He was free now. He had been out for 3 months. The letter was 4 pages, his handwriting, clear and deliberate. He had clearly rewritten it several times. The phrasing was careful in a way that suggested drafts. He said he bore me no ill will. He said he understood I had prosecuted in good faith. He said he was writing because he believed I deserved to know what he had found. He had found something.
Let me tell you what I had known at the time of the trial. Aaron Tully had been stationed at Barford Base in the winter 7 years ago. A pattern of falsified requisitions had been identified over a 6-week period. The investigation had traced the connected account to Aaron through a combination of financial records, witness accounts placing him with access to the relevant systems, and circumstantial evidence that, assembled, had produced what I had assessed as a sound prosecution case. Aaron had maintained his innocence throughout. He had said at trial that a witness had given a different account early in the investigation. He had not been able to produce that witness's statement. His defense had searched the disclosed material and had not found it. I had not known about any undisclosed statement. I had prosecuted with what I had been given. The board had found him guilty. I had moved on in the way that prosecutors move on, to the next case and the one after that. I had not forgotten Aaron Tully. I had simply filed him in the part of my professional memory where cases that are complete and resolved are kept. He had not been complete and resolved. He had been in a military prison for 7 years.
The object at the center of everything was a document, not the letter, what the letter contained. A witness statement, 4 pages, given by a Sergeant Roy Lind on the 23rd of November 7 years ago, 3 days into the investigation, before Aaron had been formally charged. Lind had given an account of the relevant period that, if accurate, would have placed Aaron away from the administrative systems at the times when the falsified entries were made. The statement had been given to a civilian police officer, a detective constable who had attended the incident as part of a joint military-civilian operation. The civilian police had logged it in their records. It had sat in their system for 7 years. Aaron's solicitor, a woman named Patricia Good who specialized in military justice reviews, had found it through a civilian Freedom of Information request. It had never been in the military investigation file. It had never been disclosed to the defense. It had never been shown to me. I read it 4 times on Thursday morning, then I put it down on my desk, and I sat with what it meant.
Major Dennis Fowler. He had been the investigating officer on the case 7 years ago. He was still serving, a lieutenant colonel now. I had worked with him twice in the intervening years on unrelated matters. He was thorough and well-regarded, and I had had no reason in 7 years to think of him in any context other than professionalism. I went to him on Friday morning. I laid the statement on his desk. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at me. He said, "I know what this is." I said, "Tell me." He said, "I took a statement from Lind in the first 3 days. Lind had a disciplinary history, and his account shifted between the initial interview and the formal statement. I assessed the statement as unreliable. I noted it in my investigation file, and I did not formally log it as unused material. He said, "I thought I was making a judgment call. I thought the statement was going to muddy the picture rather than clarify it." He said, "I did not know it existed in the civilian system. I had not known the civilian officer had taken a parallel account." He said it in the voice of a man who has been sitting with something for 7 years and has been waiting for the conversation that would eventually arrive. I said, "You should have logged it. Even assessed as unreliable, it should have been listed as unused material and disclosed." He said, "I know." He said it simply, without defense or deflection. I said, "The defense said at trial that a witness had given a different account. They searched the disclosed material and found nothing." He said, "I know. I remember." He said, "I have thought about it many times."
I want to pause here, because sitting across from a colleague I had respected for 7 years, holding a document that should have been disclosed and had not, while a man had served 7 years of his life, is the moment this story became the hardest professional reckoning I have had in 15 years of this work. I had not done anything wrong. I had prosecuted with what I had been given, but what I had been given had been incomplete, and an incomplete case had produced a complete sentence. If you have ever understood that something you believed was sound was built on a foundation you had not been shown, drop a comment below. And subscribe right now, because what I did with Dennis Fowler's admission and what I submitted to the Military Review Authority is the part that cost the most and mattered the most.
The submission. I am a military legal officer. I know the review mechanisms. I know the process for submitting a case for post-conviction review on the grounds of material non-disclosure. I submitted the case on Monday, not to protect myself, not to pursue Fowler, to give Aaron Tully's conviction the review it should have had before it ever reached a board. The submission included the civilian statement, Fowler's investigation file notation, the trial record, and a covering legal analysis I wrote myself over the weekend. The analysis was honest. It said the statement, if disclosed, would have created reasonable doubt. It said the non-disclosure had been a procedural failure rather than deliberate suppression. It said neither of those things made the outcome acceptable.
Brigadier Frances Kemp. She led the review division. She was in her late 50s, and she had the manner of someone who has reviewed enough post-conviction cases to know that most of them are straightforward, and some of them are not. And this one was not. She called me in on Wednesday. She said the review had been accepted and would proceed. She said the civilian statement would be assessed by an independent legal officer. She said the process would take between 3 and 6 months. She said, "You submitted this yourself. You were the prosecuting officer." I said, "Yes." She said, "That is unusual." I said, "It seemed like the right thing to do." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "It was." She said it plainly, as a professional assessment, not a compliment. I appreciated that.
The review. It took 4 months. The independent legal officer assessed that Lynn's statement, while not conclusive on its own, was material, unused evidence that should have been disclosed. The non-disclosure had prevented the defense from following the line of inquiry it suggested. The defense's submission at trial that a witness had given a different account, made without the statement in hand, had not been given adequate weight by the board, in part because the statement had not been produced to corroborate it. The conviction was quashed. Aaron Tully's service record was cleared. A formal finding was recorded that the non-disclosure had constituted a procedural failure in the investigation, and that the failure had materially affected the fairness of the proceedings. Fowler was formally censured. He was not prosecuted. The failure had been procedural rather than deliberate. He had cooperated fully with the review, and 15 years of otherwise clean service were weighed. He received a formal reprimand and was required to complete additional professional training in disclosure obligations.
Aaron Tully. His solicitor, Patricia Good, contacted me after the review concluded. She said Aaron had asked whether I would be willing to meet. I said yes. He came to my office on a Thursday morning, 4 months after the letter. Exactly 4 months. We did not meet in my office. I had suggested a neutral space, a meeting room in the legal building. No rank insignia on the walls, no case files visible. It seemed right that the conversation happen somewhere that belonged equally to both of us. He was 34 years old. He looked like someone who had spent 7 years being careful and was not yet entirely sure the carefulness was over. He said, "I didn't write the letter to make you feel bad." I said, "I know." He said, "I wrote it because I thought you should know, and because I thought if anyone was going to do something about it, it was probably the person who prosecuted the case." I said, "Why did you think that?" He said, "Because you prosecuted it like you believed in it. I watched you for 3 days. You weren't going through the motions." I said, "I did believe in it. I didn't know what I didn't know." He said, "That's what I thought." He sat with that for a moment. Then he said, 7 years is a long time to hold something." I said, "Yes, I'm sorry." He said, "The apology belongs somewhere between you and the system. I don't know exactly where, but it doesn't belong entirely to you." He said it without bitterness, in the way of someone who has had 7 years to work out where things belong and has arrived at some version of the answer.
Dennis Fowler. I have complicated feelings about what happened to Dennis Fowler. He had made a professional judgment that turned out to be catastrophically wrong. He had not been malicious. He had been wrong. The distinction matters, and it also does not entirely matter because the outcome was the same regardless of the intent. I put that in the covering analysis. I put it plainly. The review took it into account. I do not know if I would have done what he did. I would like to believe I would not, but I have made judgment calls in 15 years of this work, and not all of them have been right. And the difference between a wrong judgment call in a case that resolves cleanly and a wrong judgment call in a case that costs a man 7 years is sometimes a matter of circumstance as much as character. I have thought about that more than I expected to. The letter. Aaron's original letter is in my desk drawer. 4 pages, clear handwriting, careful phrasing, the work of a man who had rewritten it several times. He had written, "I believe you prosecuted in good faith. I am writing because I believe you deserve to know what I have found, and because I cannot think of what else to do with it." He had given it to the person he thought was most likely to act. He had been right.
Here's what a letter from a free man taught me. The cases we close are not always closed for the people inside them. I had moved on. That is what prosecutors do. You move on to the next case because the alternative is to carry every case indefinitely, and that is not sustainable. But moving on is a professional mechanism, not a moral one. The case had not been closed for Aaron Tully. He had carried it for 7 years. He had come out the other side of it and had sat down and written 4 careful pages and had sent them to the person he thought might do something. That is not a small act of faith. What I owe, I cannot fully repay. 7 years cannot be returned. The conviction is quashed, but the years happened and they are not unhappened by a finding. What I could do was submit the case. What I could do was write the analysis honestly. What I could do was sit across from him on a Thursday morning and not deflect the apology into the system or the process or the circumstances. I said, "I'm sorry." That was mine to say. I said it. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She built the case. She read the letter. She went back and made it right.